I thought I knew Michael better than anyone. I'd been there through his long nights at the office, the missed dinners, the endless stress that seemed to live in his briefcase. So when he came home one evening grinning like a man who'd just won the lottery, I assumed it was about work. But then he placed a small velvet box on the coffee table, his eyes gleaming with a pride I hadn't seen in years. When I opened it, my breath caught. Inside was a necklace so delicate, so expensive-looking it seemed to glow under the lamp. "This is for my mother," he said, his tone almost too smooth. "She deserves something beautiful." I smiled because that's what I was supposed to do. But inside, my chest tightened. A gift like this? For her? It didn't make sense. Michael wasn't the kind of man who gave without reason. Birthdays, anniversaries, even Christmas. His gifts were always practical, almost predictable. But this necklace, it was a contradiction I couldn't ignore. I tucked away my doubt behind a polite nod, saying nothing, but in my heart, I felt the sharp edge of suspicion. It sat with me like a pebble in my shoe, and I knew I'd carry it with me straight into the gala. That night, while Michael went on about his plans for the gala, I couldn't stop glancing at that necklace. The way it shimmered under the light, the weight of it against the velvet box. It didn't look like something chosen for a mother. It looked like something chosen for a lover. Still, I kept quiet, nodding at the right moments, letting him believe his story had landed. But deep inside, unease was tightening its grip on me. I tried to reason with myself. Maybe I was overthinking. Maybe I was being unfair. Michael was ambitious, yes, but he was also practical. He never splurged. For years I had begged him to take a vacation, buy something just for us, but he always said, "We need to save, Laura." And now, suddenly, this? My instincts whispered that there was more to it. My heart thudded in agreement. I brushed my fingers against the necklace once more before closing the box, as though touching it could give me the answers I wanted. But all it gave me was a chill, a warning I couldn't shake. Michael kissed my forehead like everything was fine, like we were the same couple we had always been. I smiled back, but in my gut, I knew the truth was coming. And the gala would be the stage where it revealed itself. In the days that followed, Michael acted as though nothing was out of the ordinary. He talked about the gala with excitement, about the people he needed to impress, about the board members whose opinions mattered more than anything else. I played along, smiling, listening, pouring him coffee in the mornings like I always had. But every time I glanced at that jewelry box on his dresser, I felt the sting of doubt all over again. I began watching him more closely, noticing the little things I'd ignored before, the way he checked his phone and quickly slid it back into his pocket, the way he came home a little later than usual, brushing it off with vague excuses. For years I had trusted him without hesitation, but now, even the smallest cracks felt like gaping holes. And the necklace, that necklace, was the proof I couldn't explain away. Still, I said nothing. I swallowed my questions, saving them for a moment that hadn't yet come. There was no fight, no confrontation, just silence, stretched thin like a thread ready to snap. I told myself to wait, to watch, to hold on until the truth finally showed its face. And something told me, when it did, it would happen under the sparkling lights of the gala. The night of the gala arrived, and I dressed with more care than usual. A sleek black dress, simple but elegant, pearls at my ears, and a steady hand applying lipstick that betrayed none of the storm brewing inside me. Michael looked every bit the polished executive, crisp suit and practiced smile, the kind of man who thrived under chandeliers and champagne toasts. As we stepped into the grand hall, I held onto his arm, my face glowing with pride. Or at least, that's what I let them all see. The room buzzed with laughter, clinking glasses, and the low hum of whispered conversations. I smiled. I nodded. I played the role of the supportive wife. That was my part, after all, the one I had perfected through the years. But beneath the surface, I was scanning, watching. My eyes wandered across sequined gowns and tailored suits, searching for something I couldn't quite name yet. Until suddenly, I found it. She was standing near the bar, her hair catching the golden light like it belonged there, her laughter bright, practiced. Sophie, Michael's assistant. And there, resting delicately on her collarbone, was the necklace. The very same necklace Michael swore was for his mother. My breath stilled in my chest as though someone had knocked the air right out of me. And when Sophie's eyes locked onto mine, she smiled. Not kindly, not innocently, but with a smirk that said she knew exactly what she was doing. That smirk, it was like a silent dare, a taunt wrapped in lipstick and confidence. My stomach twisted, but I refused to give her the satisfaction of seeing me falter. Instead, I lifted my glass, sipped my champagne, and offered a smile so poised it could have been carved from glass. If she wanted a reaction, she'd have to work harder for it. Still, inside, the betrayal burned hot and merciless. Michael, oblivious, or pretending to be, chatted with colleagues, laughing louder than necessary, performing like the night was his personal stage. I drifted through the room, mingling with other wives and partners, nodding through their stories of vacations, children, and summer homes. But my mind wasn't there. It stayed fixed on that necklace, gleaming like a spotlight, screaming the truth I hadn't wanted to hear. At one point, Sophie brushed past me, her perfume trailing like a warning. She tilted her head just slightly, enough for the diamond to catch the light. I swear she did it on purpose. My hands clenched around my clutch, but my face stayed calm, unreadable. If Michael had taught me anything through the years, it was patience. And in that moment, I knew. Patience would be my weapon. As the evening carried on, I found myself drifting further into observation. Every glance, every whisper seemed sharper, like the room had split into two worlds, the one everyone else was enjoying, and the one where I stood, quietly unraveling a truth I could no longer deny. I caught Michael sneaking looks toward Sophie, subtle but not subtle enough for me to miss. Each look was a spark, and together they painted a fire I could no longer pretend wasn't there. I kept my smile steady, my laughter polite, while inside my chest, a storm was building. Betrayal doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It slithers in, quiet and cruel, and then suddenly it's everywhere. I wondered how many of the people around us already knew, how many had seen what I was just now forced to face. That thought stung more than the necklace itself. By the time the speeches began, I no longer heard the words. Applause rippled through the crowd, but all I could feel was the weight of that glittering truth hanging around Sophie's neck. My fingers tightened around my glass, and I whispered silently to myself, "Not here, not now." The stage wasn't ready yet. But when it was, oh, I'd be more than ready. My heart sank that night, but I refused to let it show. I kept my smile painted on, even as the truth settled like a stone in my stomach. Betrayal has a way of making the world feel louder. The clink of glasses, the burst of laughter, the hum of conversation. All of it suddenly rang in my ears, mocking me. But I stood tall, heels anchored to the marble floor, determined not to crack under Sophie's smug gaze. Later, as I made my way through the crowd, I caught the sound of her voice again. Sophie laughed, her tone dripping with something just shy of arrogance. "Some men really know how to spoil a woman," she teased, her words directed at no one in particular, yet sharp enough to cut. Her colleagues chuckled knowingly, and that was all I needed. The necklace wasn't just jewelry, it was evidence. And her laugh was the confession. I didn't confront Michael that night. What would have been the point? Anger in public only feeds the guilty, and I wasn't about to give him that power. Instead, I tucked the truth neatly into my silence, saving it like ammunition for a war I hadn't yet declared. Planning is an art, and I suddenly realized I had been preparing my whole life to master it. The drive home that night was quiet. Michael hummed along to the radio, drumming his fingers on the steering wheel, completely unaware of the storm raging beside him. I stared out the window, the city lights blurring into streaks of gold and red, thinking how strange it felt to sit so close to someone who had already betrayed me. He glanced at me once, asked if I was tired, and I just smiled. Tired wasn't the word. It was hollow, raw, wide awake in every sense. When we pulled into the driveway, I carried myself inside like nothing had changed, though everything had. Michael poured himself a drink, loosened his tie, and turned on the news as if it were any other evening. I excused myself, retreating to the bedroom. Sitting on the edge of the bed, I realized that silence was no longer weakness. It was strategy. If he thought I was blind, then I had the upper hand. Lying awake, I began piecing things together. Every late night, every secretive glance at his phone, every excuse suddenly fell into place like puzzle pieces I had ignored for too long. The picture was ugly, yes, but it was also clear. And in that clarity, I found something surprising, not despair, but resolve. Michael had made his move. Now it was my turn to make mine. The next morning, I stood in front of the mirror, brushing my hair with deliberate slowness. My reflection looked the same, but I felt different. It was as if a curtain had been pulled back, revealing the stage for what it truly was. Michael's betrayal wasn't just a wound, it was an opening, a chance to rewrite the story I had been living in for far too long. And I wasn't going to waste it on shouting matches or tearful begging. As Michael rushed out the door with his briefcase, I watched him go, my expression calm, almost serene. He thought he had fooled me, thought I was too trusting to see the truth. That was his mistake. Because trust, once broken, doesn't disappear. It sharpens. It becomes focus, precision. I wasn't the woman who would crumble under the weight of his lies. I was the woman who would use them. I walked back inside, poured myself a cup of coffee, and let the steam warm my face. My mind was already working, quietly, methodically, as if the pieces had been waiting for this moment to fall into place. Revenge didn't need to be loud, it needed to be clever. And I knew exactly where I would start, by finding the proof that would turn his glittering necklace into his downfall. At home, when Michael wasn't around, I began my quiet search. It started innocently enough, an extra glance at his phone left on the counter, a careful look through the pockets of his jackets. But soon it became deliberate, a mission. I wasn't hunting for suspicion anymore. I was hunting for proof. And proof, I discovered, is never as well hidden as the guilty think it is. The first clue came in the form of a receipt crumpled in his desk drawer. A dinner for two at a restaurant he had sworn he'd never taken me to because it was too extravagant. I held the paper in my hand, the ink still bold, as if daring me to deny what I already knew. Then came the messages, tucked away in his email, filled with words that left no room for interpretation. Sophie's name appeared more times than I could count, tangled with promises and secrets. Each discovery cut deep, but strangely it didn't break me. Instead, it steadied me. With every receipt, every message, every careless slip Michael had left behind, I felt my anger harden into something sharper, something I could use. Rage might burn hot, but strategy lasts. And I was beginning to see exactly where his weaknesses lived. One evening, after Michael fell asleep on the couch with a half-empty glass of scotch, I slipped into his office. The glow of his computer screen lit up the dark room, casting long shadows across the shelves he was so proud of. I opened folders, clicked through emails, and scrolled until my stomach knotted. There it was. Reservations, hotel confirmations, even photos he had been careless enough to save. Sophie's smile, her hand resting on his shoulder like she owned him. But what caught my attention wasn't just the affair. It was his timing. In a series of messages, I found references to the board's upcoming decision, the very one Michael had been obsessing over for months. Sophie teased him about celebrating once his promotion came through, about how she'd be there to spoil him when it happened. Suddenly, their little secret wasn't just personal, it was professional. And that made it dangerous. I leaned back in his chair, my pulse steady despite the fury in my chest. I knew enough about Michael's world to understand one thing. Perception was everything. A whisper in the wrong ear could unravel a career built over decades. And Sophie, well, she wasn't exactly the model of discretion. I realized then, I didn't need to confront them. I only needed to let the right people see what I had seen. The next day, while Michael showered, I quietly copied the files onto a flash drive I had tucked into my robe pocket. Screenshots of messages, photos of Sophie at the gala with the necklace, even the receipts. Every piece of evidence neatly organized, waiting to be used. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to cry. All I needed was timing, and timing, I had learned, was everything. It didn't take long to find the perfect opportunity. Sophie's name had already floated through the office rumor mill, whispers about her closeness to Michael. All it took was a carefully worded anonymous email to HR, with attachments that spoke louder than any accusation. I wrote it plainly, without venom, letting the facts do the damage for me. The necklace glimmered in one of the photos. Unmistakable. Undeniable. When I hit send, a calmness washed over me. It wasn't the kind of satisfaction that comes from revenge delivered. It was the anticipation, the knowledge that the wheels were in motion and couldn't be stopped. Michael thought he was untouchable. Sophie thought she was clever, but I knew better. The necklace wasn't her prize, it was her noose. And soon enough, they'd both feel it tightening. Weeks later, the fallout arrived like a storm no one saw coming, except me. Michael was called into the boardroom, his face pale as whispers trailed behind him like shadows. I knew what was waiting for him in there, the evidence, the photographs, the undeniable connections between him and Sophie. His promotion, the one he had built his entire future on, was suddenly suspended. The look in his eyes when he walked through the door that evening told me everything. He slammed his briefcase on the counter, his fury spilling out in every sharp word. "Do you have any idea what they're saying about me? About us?" he shouted, pacing like a caged animal. But I stayed calm, my voice steady, my hands folded in front of me. Anger was his weapon, not mine. Mine was truth, sharpened and ready. And I wasn't going to let him twist it anymore. Michael blamed me, of course. Men like him always do. But in that moment, standing in our kitchen with his rage bouncing off the walls, I realized something important. I wasn't afraid of him anymore. I had lived too long in his shadow, too long silencing my own instincts. Now, with the truth laid bare for the world to see, it was finally my turn to speak. And when I did, I made sure he'd never forget it. I looked him straight in the eyes, letting his fury burn itself out against the wall of my silence. Then, when the room fell quiet, I finally spoke. "You said it was for your mother," I reminded him, my voice calm, deliberate. He froze, his jaw tightening, because he knew exactly what I meant. That necklace had been his lie, his downfall, the thread I had pulled until the entire fabric of his life unraveled. He tried to defend himself, stumbling over excuses, twisting words like he always did. But I didn't flinch. "Turns out you were right," I said, my hand already sliding the wedding ring off my finger. "Because only a mother would still love a son who lies like you." The silence that followed was heavier than any scream, and for the first time, I saw him without his armor, small and cornered. I placed the ring on the counter, the metal clicking softly against the marble, final and undeniable. His eyes widened, not in sorrow but in panic. Panic at losing the control he had always assumed he held. And as he stood there, sputtering for words that wouldn't come, I walked toward the door with a steady calm. This wasn't a goodbye in tears. It was freedom in motion, the first breath of air after being underwater too long. By the time I stepped outside, the night air wrapped around me like a blanket I didn't know I needed. My bag was already packed, my accounts already secured, every step carefully planned long before this moment. Michael thought he had been clever, thought he'd been in control, but I had been 3 steps ahead. I wasn't walking into the unknown. I was walking into a future I had built for myself. Behind me, through the window, I could see him pacing, his hands pulling at his hair as though that might undo the truth. But the truth was permanent now, carved into his reputation, stitched into his career. Sophie was gone, dismissed quietly to protect the company's image. His promotion, frozen indefinitely. And me? I was no longer the quiet wife who stood by in silence. I was the woman who had ended the performance. As I closed the gate, I whispered the words I had been holding back for weeks. He bought her a necklace. I gave her the noose. And with that, I didn't look back. The chapter of Michael and his lies was finished, but my story, my real story, was only just beginning.
"We're ending your research grant immediately, Dr. Kim," said the pharmaceutical executive from the boardroom table. "Gene therapy for rare diseases doesn't make money." I nodded politely, but I kept quiet about the fact that earlier that day I had learned my side project, one they had repeatedly discouraged, had successfully produced a compound that could change treatment for thousands of patients, including my own brother. My name is Mai Kim. At 34, I was about to lose my job as research director at Helix Pharmaceuticals, one of the country's largest drug companies. For 3 years, I had led their gene therapy division, working on treatments for rare genetic disorders while secretly developing a bold new idea that Helix executives dismissed as too experimental and not profitable. "The board has looked at your team's progress reports," continued Philip Carrington, Helix's CEO, speaking in a rehearsed tone that made it clear the decision had been made long ago. "Your work is scientifically impressive, but the market for these rare diseases is too small to justify further investment." Around the table, the Helix executives and board members showed expressions ranging from boredom to thinly veiled satisfaction. My direct supervisor, Dr. Harold Freeman, avoided meeting my eyes as he stared at his tablet. He had warned me many times to focus on research that would attract more money, studying common disorders that could lead to blockbuster drugs. "I understand," I said calmly while gathering my presentation materials, the promising results that would now never be seen. "When should I leave my lab?" "By the end of the week," Carrington replied, already checking his phone. "HR will contact you about your severance." After the meeting, Dr. Freeman came over. "I'm sorry, May. I tried to defend your team, but the numbers." "The numbers," I interrupted softly, "don't reflect human suffering. Just because fewer people need a treatment doesn't make it any less important." He sighed, his tired expression hinting that he might agree. "This is a business, not a charity. You've always had trouble with that. And you've always been good at accepting it," I replied kindly. We had worked together for 7 years, and despite our differences, I respected his scientific judgment. "What will you do now?" he asked. I smiled a little, remembering an email from Dr. Yasmin Chen, my collaborator at University Hospital. "I have options." Back in my lab, my team was waiting, their faces tense. They knew this meeting might be our last chance to secure funding. I led 6 talented scientists, each personally connected to the rare diseases we studied. Marcus's niece had Tay-Sachs disease, Sophia's cousin had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and my younger brother Jin had been diagnosed with Fanconi anemia when we were children. "They're shutting us down," I announced directly. There was no need to soften the news. The team's reactions ranged from resignation to anger. We had all seen this coming because of the mounting pressure to change our research focus, the budget cuts, and suddenly unavailable equipment. So, are you saying 3 years of work are just thrown away? Marcus asked, his voice tight. Not thrown away, I corrected quietly as I closed the door, and certainly not finished. I opened a secure email on my tablet and passed it around. It contained early results from Compound RD27, an experimental gene therapy delivery system I had been developing alongside our official research at Helix. Using university hospitals' facilities with Dr. Chen, I had been testing a daring new method that combined CRISPR gene editing with a new type of virus for delivery. A project that Helix had specifically told me to stop because it was too risky and expensive. This is amazing, Sophia whispered as she studied the data. 85% success rate, that's unheard of. And it's ours, I said firmly, not Helix. I made sure we kept it separate. We did this on our own time, using non-Helix resources. What are you suggesting? Asked Raj, our computational biologist. I'm starting my own company. I've been preparing for this for months and already have investors lined up who specialize in biotech startups. I looked at each of them, and I want you all to join me. A heavy silence followed. Leaving a stable job at Helix for an untested startup was a big risk, even with promising results. What would we be giving up? Asked Liu, the most practical one in our group. Helix has money, labs, and a strong reputation. And shareholders who don't care about rare diseases, I replied. I'm offering you a chance to finish what we started, to create treatments that otherwise might never exist. By the end of the day, all 6 of them agreed to come with me. We had 2 days to gather our personal research notes and prepare to leave. We followed all legal and ethical rules, making sure to keep only our original work and ideas. On my last day, Dr. Freeman stopped by as I packed my things. I heard a rumor, he said, that Aurelia Ventures is funding a new biotech company focused on rare diseases. I kept my face neutral. Aurelia Ventures was indeed backing us. But I didn't want Helix to know yet. I haven't heard that. Haven't you? He studied me. Be careful, me. Helix doesn't like competition, especially from ex-employees. Is that a warning or a threat, Harold? A friendly heads up. Carrington plays tough, and he has lawyers to back him up. He hesitated, then added, For what it's worth, I think you were right about the research, about the priorities. But this industry doesn't have to be this way, I finished for him. That's what I intend to prove. He nodded and held out his hand. Good luck, Dr. Kim. I have a feeling we'll be hearing about your work again. 2 weeks later, we launched Nexus Therapeutics in a small incubator near University Hospital. Dr. Chen joined as Chief Medical Officer, and we recruited 2 more scientists through academic networks. Our office was small, our lab equipment secondhand, but the energy was incredible. Without Helix's corporate bureaucracy, we moved fast. Ironically, the very research Helix had called financially unviable was now attracting serious investor interest. Our seed funding had gone beyond expectations, and advocacy groups reached out about partnerships. 3 months in, we had a major breakthrough. ID27 successfully corrected genes in cells from 3 different rare diseases, including Fanconi anemia. Our findings were published in a prestigious journal, giving Nexus its first big moment in the spotlight. The day after the paper was released, my phone rang from an unknown number. Dr. Kim, this is Philip Carrington from Helix Pharmaceuticals. I nearly dropped my phone in shock. Mr. Carrington, what can I do for you? I'll get straight to the point. Your RD27 results are impressive. The technology could be useful beyond rare diseases. That's true, I said cautiously. Helix would like to discuss a collaboration or licensing deal. With our resources, we could speed up development significantly. It was both satisfying and infuriating. The same company that had dismissed my work now wanted a piece of it. I appreciate the interest, Mr. Carrington, but Nexus is focused on rare diseases not as a side project, but as our main goal. I understand your passion, Dr. Kim, but be realistic. Clinical trials, approvals, and manufacturing require resources. Startups struggle with that. His tone was polite, but his message was clear. Without Helix, we might never bring our treatments to market. We have enough funding for our current projects, I said. That wasn't entirely true. While we had secured good initial investment, we would need much more to get FDA approval. I see. A brief pause. Then we should discuss Helix patents. Our legal team believes your work may overlap with our intellectual property. And there it was, the thinly veiled threat. If we didn't cooperate, they would drag us into a legal battle we couldn't afford. I'm sure our lawyers would find that conversation interesting. I replied calmly, though my heart was racing. Especially since we have clear documentation proving we developed RD-27 independently. I kept my tone steady. Was there anything else, Mr. Carrington? After hanging up, I called an emergency meeting with our team and legal advisors. Helix's threat was serious. Even if they didn't have a strong case, a lawsuit could scare off our investors and slow us down. Exactly what Carrington wanted. They're bluffing, Raj said, reviewing our patents. RD-27 is completely different from anything Helix owns. But they don't need to win, Sophia pointed out. Just filing a lawsuit could make our investors nervous. Dr. Chen, who had been quiet, finally spoke. What if we go public? A giant pharmaceutical company trying to crush a rare disease startup wouldn't look good. That's risky, our lawyer warned. It could backfire. Carrington has powerful connections. We debated late into the night, but there was no clear solution. After everyone left, I stared at the whiteboard, filled with ideas and counter-strategies. It all felt familiar. Big companies deciding who deserved treatment based on profit, not need. My phone chimed. A text from Jin. Still at the lab? Don't forget to eat. Also, Dad's birthday dinner is Sunday. His message brought sudden clarity. This wasn't just business, it was about Jin and others like him who needed someone to stand up for them. The next morning, I made 2 important calls. The first was to Angela Torres, a respected journalist who covered healthcare and drug accessibility. The second was to Dr. Freeman. Harold, it's Meg Kim. I think Helix is about to sue Nexus Therapeutics. My hands shook, but I kept my voice steady. I've heard rumors, he admitted. May, I warned you. Carrington doesn't play fair. I need your help. The words were hard to say, but the situation demanded it. A long pause. What kind of help? Proof. Internal documents showing that Helix rejected this research despite its potential. Evidence that they only cared about profits. You're asking me to leak company documents? That could ruin my career. I'm asking you to stop a corporation from blocking life-saving treatments. You told me I was right about the research. Another long silence. I'll think about it. I wasn't sure if he would help, but at least the wheels were in motion. The next day, Angela Torres interviewed me. It was a gamble. Speaking out could either protect us or make Helix come after us harder. 3 days later, her article was published. Pharmaceutical giant threatens startup fighting for rare disease patients. Angela had done a brilliant job. She explained the science, the ethics, and the human side, especially Jin's struggle with Fanconi anemia. She exposed how corporate profits dictated which diseases got treatments. Helix's aggressive tactics against Nexus became a case study in everything wrong with the system. The public reaction was immediate. Patient advocacy groups spoke out, social media exploded in outrage, and leading bioethicists criticized Helix. By the afternoon, Helix's stock had dropped 4%. Then something shocking happened. An anonymous source leaked internal Helix documents to major news outlets. Memos, emails, and meeting notes proved what we had suspected. Helix had canceled rare disease research, even after seeing promising results, simply because the market was too small. Worst of all was an email from Carrington himself, dismissing patient advocacy concerns as irrelevant to shareholder interests. The leak turned a fleeting controversy into a full-blown scandal. Helix wasn't just facing public backlash, it was now dealing with potential shareholder lawsuits for misrepresenting its research pipeline. I never confirmed whether Dr. Freeman was the source, but a week later, he called me with unexpected news. I've resigned from Helix, he said. They doubled down instead of addressing legitimate concerns. Now they're hunting for the leak and planning aggressive countermeasures against Nexus. Are you all right? I asked, concerned about the professional costs of his decision. Surprisingly, yes. It's liberating to finally make a decision based on principles rather than corporate pragmatism. He hesitated, then added, I've already been approached by 3 institutions to lead rare disease programs. Seems like the field is suddenly in demand. Nexus, too, benefited in ways we hadn't anticipated. The scandal amplified our visibility, attracting top-tier scientists and investors. Two major foundations specializing in rare diseases awarded us grants, and a prominent biotech investor proposed a series of funding rounds, securing our operations for at least 2 years. Most significantly, a coalition of patient advocacy groups reached out with a revolutionary idea, a funding model prioritizing accessibility over profit. Their plan ensured fair pricing and reinvested revenue into further rare disease research, an approach that could reshape the industry. 6 months after leaving Helix, I stood at the National Institutes of Health's Genetic Medicine Conference, presenting our latest findings. Our early clinical trials for RD27 in treating Fanconi anemia showed promise, enough to generate serious interest. Jin, now enrolled in the trial, was showing his first real signs of improvement. As I wrapped up, I noticed a familiar figure in the back row, Philip Carrington. After the Q&A, he approached the podium. "Impressive work, Dr. Kim," he said, his tone measured. "Helix has been following your progress." "I'm aware," I replied. Their legal threats had evaporated after the leaks made their case untenable, but we knew they were watching. "The board has undergone some changes. There's new leadership interested in reevaluating our approach to rare disease treatments." He handed me a business card. "If you're open to discussion, we'd like to explore potential synergies." I accepted it without commitment. "Nexus has a clear mission, Mr. Carrington. Any collaboration would have to align with that. The industry is evolving. Companies that don't adapt risk becoming irrelevant." There was a grudging respect in his voice, an admission that we have forced their hand. That night, over dinner at Jin's favorite restaurant, I told him about the encounter. "So now that you've proven them wrong, Helix wants back in," he asked with a smirk. "Are you going to work with them?" I considered it. Their resources could help, manufacturing, distribution, regulatory experience, but I don't trust them. "You wanted to change things from the inside," he pointed out. "Maybe," I admitted, watching him, the healthiest he'd been in years. "But sometimes you have to build something new to prove what's possible." Over the next year, Nexus grew rapidly. We opened a larger research facility, expanded clinical trials to 5 additional rare genetic disorders, and launched the Nexus Access Program, ensuring no patient would be denied treatment due to cost. Our model started influencing other biotech firms facing growing public pressure over drug pricing. Dr. Freeman eventually joined us as research director, leading an expanded team of scientists drawn by both the mission and the science. Our research showed that treatments developed for rare diseases often unlocked insights into more common conditions, proving that medical progress shouldn't be dictated by market size. 18 months after our standoff with Helix, I received an unexpected visitor at Nexus headquarters. Andrea Whitman, Helix's newly appointed CEO, had requested a meeting. "Dr. Kim, thank you for your time," she said, her manner refreshingly direct, free of Carrington's veiled arrogance. "I'll be honest. Helix has changed. New leadership, new philosophy. We recognize that our past approach to rare disease research was flawed." I gave a wry smile. "That's one way to put it." "The industry is at a crossroads," Andrea Whitman continued. "Traditional pharmaceutical models are under pressure, regulatory scrutiny, public trust issues, and new funding approaches like yours. Forward-thinking companies need to adapt." "And Helix now considers itself forward-thinking?" I asked. "Helix recognizes that it nearly dismissed a transformative therapeutic approach because of outdated metrics of value." She placed a folder on my desk. "We'd like to propose a strategic partnership, not an acquisition or takeover, but a collaborative framework that preserves Nexus's independence and mission while leveraging Helix's infrastructure to accelerate treatment availability." I opened the folder, scanning the proposal with professional interest while keeping my expression neutral. The terms were surprisingly equitable, with explicit protections for Nexus's research priorities and access commitments. "This is not what I expected," I admitted. "The board has realized that there's both scientific and business value in approaches they once dismissed," she said with a small smile. "Having one's assumptions publicly proven wrong tends to facilitate reconsideration." "Why Nexus specifically? There are other rare disease biotech companies. None with your combination of scientific innovation and ethical framework. Your access program has become a model. And frankly, Helix needs to rebuild its reputation. A partnership with Nexus would demonstrate a genuine commitment to change. The proposal required careful consideration. After thanking her, I promised a thorough review with our leadership team. As she left, I sat at my desk, reflecting on how far we'd come. 3 years ago, I had been forced out of Helix for believing that scientific merit and human need should drive research priorities as much as market calculations. Now, that same company was seeking a partnership, one that, if structured correctly, could bring our model to a much larger scale. Later that week, our team gathered to discuss the proposal. Opinions were divided. They need us more than we need them, Raj argued. Our reputation is spotless. Theirs is still recovering. But their global manufacturing capacity could make our treatments available worldwide years sooner, Dr. Chen countered. There are patients who can't wait. Dr. Freeman, who had remained quiet, finally spoke. May, you've seen Helix from both sides. What do you think? I took a breath. Institutions can change when the people within them change. Andrea Whitman has a different vision than Philip Carrington did. But any partnership needs ironclad guarantees on treatment accessibility and research priorities. The debate continued for days, expanding to include patient advocates and ethical advisors. Ultimately, we moved forward with a modified version of the proposal, one that maintained Nexus's independence while establishing a collaborative framework for manufacturing and distribution. 6 months later, I stood in a hospital room, watching as the first commercially available treatment for Fanconi anemia was administered to a 10-year-old girl named Sophia. Her parents had traveled across the country, not for a clinical trial, but for an approved therapy, one made available regardless of insurance status or financial situation, thanks to the access program we have fought to protect. Jin, now in remission and working as a patient advocate for Nexus, sat beside me. Remember when they said this would never be commercially viable? He asked, his smile wry. They weren't entirely wrong, I admitted. Under the traditional pharmaceutical model, the numbers didn't work. That's why we had to create a different model. As we left the room, we passed the oncology research wing where Dr. Chen was leading a new study applying our delivery technology to cancer therapies, an extension of our work that might help far more patients than we had originally imagined. Over coffee in the hospital cafeteria, Jin mentioned a call he had received. Dr. Harrison from the NIH. They're launching a new institute for translational research in understudied diseases. They want me on the patient advisory board. And they want you on the scientific oversight committee. That's a significant commitment, I noted, though I was already intrigued. It's a chance to influence research priorities at the national level, Jin said, to make sure scientific value isn't constantly overshadowed by market value. I thought back to the moment Helix had deemed our research commercially unviable. The treatment that had saved Jin's life, now saving others, would never have existed under that paradigm. I'll do it, I said. It's time to change the system, not just work around it. Later that day, I received an email from Andrea Whitman. Helix's board had approved the expanded access program for all rare disease treatments developed through our partnership. It was a major victory, proof that the model we had fought for was gaining traction. 3 years after being told my research wasn't commercially viable, I had not only proven its scientific merit but helped pioneer a sustainable model that balanced innovation with accessibility. We had demonstrated that ethical principles and scientific advancement could coexist with business success. As I walked through the Nexus laboratories that evening, watching our team push the boundaries of genetic medicine, I reflected on the power of perseverance. The most transformative breakthroughs don't just come from challenging scientific assumptions. They come from questioning the systems that determine which science is pursued in the first place. Jin had been right when he suggested I originally wanted to change things from the inside. But sometimes the most effective way to reform a system is to build something better, something that forces it to evolve. Lining the hallways were patient testimonials, stories of lives changed by treatments that had once been deemed impossible. They were the clearest proof that innovation isn't just about what's scientifically feasible. It's about what we choose to make possible. And in the end, that was our greatest breakthrough. The day I was fired from Nexus Technologies for being too old to innovate, I was 41 years old with 3 advanced degrees and 14 patents to my name. That same afternoon, I emptied my retirement account, sold my Tesla, and made the first entry in what would become the most valuable algorithm in data security history, All because my 28-year-old CEO thought a woman my age belonged in middle management, not leading his R&D division. My name is Meera Patel, and this is how I turned corporate humiliation into a billion-dollar redemption. The direction of our security division needs fresh perspectives, Meera, Adam Reynolds explained, leaning back in his ergonomic chair in that calculated casual posture they teach in executive coaching sessions. His office overlooked San Francisco Bay through floor-to-ceiling windows, a view I'd helped pay for with the data encryption protocols I'd developed over my 12 years with the company. "You've been an incredible asset," he continued, not meeting my eyes. "But we're pivoting toward a more aggressive, cutting-edge approach. We think you'd be better suited to an advisory role. Less pressure, more stability." Translation: We're moving you away from innovation to make room for younger talent who'll work twice the hours for half your salary. I sat perfectly still, absorbing the carefully crafted corporate speak that masked the simple truth. I was being sidelined. The advisory role would come with a modest title, no team, and the unspoken expectation that I'd eventually leave quietly. "I see," I replied, my voice betraying none of the fury building inside me. "And who will be taking over the quantum encryption project?" The project I conceptualized, pitched, and spent 3 years developing. Adam brightened, relieved I wasn't making a scene. "Ethan Zhao, you know him, right? Brilliant kid from your team. MIT, incredible coding skills. He's really impressed the board with his vision for where the project could go." Ethan, my protégé. The brilliant kid I personally recruited, trained, and mentored. The one I'd shared my unpublished research with over late-night coding sessions and weekend brainstorms. "Ethan is certainly talented," I acknowledged, maintaining professional composure while mentally cataloging every vulnerability in the security architecture I'd designed. "When does this transition take effect?" "Immediately," Adam replied, sliding a folder across his desk. "HR has prepared a generous severance package if you prefer to make a clean break rather than take the advisory position. Either way, we'll need you to transition your projects by the end of the week." The severance package would have covered my expenses for 6 months, a small price for them to pay for my intellectual capital, my institutional knowledge, and my dignified silence. I didn't take it. Instead, I accepted the advisory role, spent a week meticulously documenting my work while secretly copying research that legally belonged to me but contractually belonged to Nexus. Then submitted my resignation citing personal reasons. Adam seemed relieved. Ethan seemed uncomfortable but ambitious enough to overcome any loyalty to his mentor. The rest of the team sent a tasteful bouquet and a card signed with generic well wishes. 12 years reduced to flowers that would wilt within days. I didn't waste time on bitterness. The night after my last day, I sat in my apartment surrounded by whiteboards and emptied my retirement account of $317,842. The financial advisor on the phone strongly advised against this decision, citing tax penalties and the recklessness of liquidating long-term investments. "I understand the implications," I assured him. "Process the withdrawal." Next, I sold my Tesla for $68,000 cash. Significantly below market value, but enough to bring my total capital to just under $400,000. I needed operating runway, and I needed it immediately. My former colleagues, would have called me irrational, impulsive, possibly having a midlife crisis. They would have been wrong. What I was doing was applying the same analytical thinking to my career that I'd applied to encryption problems for over a decade. When a system fails catastrophically, you don't patch it. You rebuild it from first principles. I rented a small warehouse space in Oakland, purchased servers and computing equipment, and set up what would become the headquarters of Adamant Security. The name was my private joke, both a reference to the unbreakable protection my software would provide and a subtle acknowledgement of who had pushed me to this point. For the next 18 months, I worked in near isolation, developing what the tech press would later call the most significant breakthrough in data encryption since quantum computing. But that came later. During those months, I lived on ramen noodles, caffeine, and mathematical determination. The breakthrough itself is difficult to explain to non-specialists, but essentially, I created an adaptive encryption algorithm that could predict attack methodologies before they occurred. While conventional security reacted to threats, my system anticipated them through pattern recognition and probabilistic modeling. The irony wasn't lost on me. Being labeled too old to innovate had freed me to create something revolutionary. By month 14, I had a functioning prototype but was running dangerously low on funds. The remaining $42,000 in my account wouldn't last much longer, and the patent application process alone would cost nearly half that amount. It was time to seek investment, but I approached this strategically. Rather than pursuing traditional VC firms who might prioritize Nexus's interests due to existing relationships, I reached out to Catherine Lin, founder of Veridian Technologies, known for both her technical expertise and her contentious history with Adam Reynolds. Our meeting was scheduled for 30 minutes. It lasted 4 hours. "This is either complete genius or elaborate science fiction," Catherine said after I'd walked her through the technical specifications. "If it works as described, every major technology company, government agency, and financial institution in the world will need it." "It works," I replied simply, "and I can prove it." The demonstration was compelling enough for Catherine to offer $5 million for a 20% stake in Adamant Security. I counter-offered at 15%, knowing the true value of what I created. We settled at 18%, with Catherine taking a board seat and providing introductions to her extensive network. Within 3 months, we had our first client, a mid-sized financial technology company desperate for protection after a devastating data breach. 6 months later, we had 10 clients, including 2 Fortune 500 companies and a European government agency. Nexus Technologies remained completely unaware of my activities. As far as they were concerned, I had disappeared into obscurity, perhaps taken early retirement or found a comfortable teaching position. That changed on a rainy Tuesday in November, 27 months after my dismissal. The call came from Catherine. "Adam Reynolds is trying to reach you," she said without preamble. "Apparently, Nexus has been experiencing some unusual security challenges they think you might help with." I smiled at the euphemism. Unusual security challenges was corporate speak for we're being systematically hacked and can't stop it. How did they trace Adamant back to me? I asked, genuinely curious. I'd been careful to maintain a low profile, serving as CTO while Catherine handled the more public-facing aspects of the business. "They didn't," Catherine replied, amusement evident in her voice. "They have no idea you founded a security company. They're reaching out to former employees with relevant expertise, and your name naturally came up. Ethan Zayoff suggested they contact you." The perfect symmetry of the situation wasn't lost on me. The brilliant kid who had taken my position was now recommending they ask for my help. "What would you like me to do?" Catherine asked. I considered my options carefully. Vindictive satisfaction would be refusing the meeting, letting Nexus suffer the consequences of their decision. Strategic advantage would be taking the meeting, learning about their vulnerabilities, and using that knowledge to further refine Adamant's products. But there was a third option, one that would satisfy both personal and professional objectives. Set up the meeting, I decided. But not with Adam. I'll meet with their technical team only, and I'll require a comprehensive NDA that protects Adamant's interests. 2 days later, I walked into Nexus Technologies for the first time in over 2 years. The receptionist didn't recognize me. The security guard issued me a visitor badge, asking me to spell my name twice to get it right. In the conference room, I found Ethan Zhao and 3 security engineers I didn't recognize. Ethan had aged, not physically, but in the worn expression of someone carrying excessive responsibility. When he saw me, genuine relief washed over his face. "Dr. Patel," he said, standing to greet me. "Thank you for coming. We've been facing some complex challenges." "So I understand," I replied neutrally. "I've reviewed the NDA and am ready to proceed." For the next hour, they detailed the attacks Nexus had been experiencing, sophisticated, targeted breaches that somehow anticipated their defensive measures before implementation. Their quantum encryption project, my quantum encryption project, had stalled, hampered by conceptual limitations they couldn't overcome. "It's as if the attackers can see our security architecture from the inside," one engineer explained. "We change our protocols, and within hours, they've adapted." I nodded, saying little, asking precise questions that led them to reveal the full extent of their vulnerability. It was worse than I'd imagined. Not only was their security compromised, but the fundamental approach they'd taken after my departure was fundamentally flawed. "What's your assessment?" Ethan asked finally, the strain evident in his voice. "Your current security architecture is unsalvageable. I stated matter-of-factly. You need to implement a predictive defense system rather than continuing with reactive measures. Predictive defense? Is that even possible with current technology? One of the younger engineers asked. It is. I opened my laptop and displayed a simplified version of Adamant's system architecture. This is what we've developed at Adamant Security. The room fell silent as they processed both the technical information and the revelation that their former colleague now led a competing security firm. You founded a company? Ethan asked, his expression a complex mixture of admiration and consternation. I did, I confirmed. After identifying certain career limitations here, I decided to pursue independent research. The implication hung in the air, unaddressed but unmistakable. Can Adamant help us? Ethan asked directly, professional enough to focus on the crisis at hand rather than the uncomfortable history between us. We can, I replied, but not under a consulting arrangement. Nexus would need to become a client of Adamant Security, with standard terms and conditions. Adam won't like that, one of the engineers muttered. That's unfortunate, I responded, gathering my materials. But the alternative is continuing to watch your security infrastructure fail systematically. I imagine your clients might have opinions about that as well. I left them with Adamant's standard contract and my business card. In the elevator, I allowed myself a small smile, not of vindication, but of professional satisfaction. I had built something valuable enough that the company that discarded me now needed my help. 3 days later, Adam Reynolds himself called. Mira, he began, his voice carrying that forced warmth executives use when they need something. I understand you've started a security company. Congratulations. Thank you, Adam. What can I do for you? I've reviewed the proposal you left with our team, he continued. While the technology seems promising, the terms are problematic for us. Perhaps we could discuss a more customized arrangement, maybe involving some equity exchange or even acquisition talks. Nexus has always valued innovation, as you know. The subtext was clear. He was offering to buy Adamant rather than become our client. It would allow Nexus to absorb my technology while saving face. I'm afraid Adamant isn't for sale, I replied evenly. Our standard client agreement remains our only offering to Nexus. Mira. Adam's voice took on a harder edge. Let's be practical. We both know there might be questions about the intellectual origins of Adamant's technology, given your previous work here. So there it was, the veiled threat. Imply potential IP litigation to force compliance. That's an interesting perspective, Adam. Our attorneys have thoroughly documented the independent development of our technology, but I understand your concern. Perhaps it would be best if Nexus sought security solutions elsewhere. The silence on the line stretched for several seconds. The client agreement, he finally said. Send over the final version and we'll sign today. Nexus Technologies became Adamant Security's highest-paying client, implementing our system across their entire infrastructure. The attacks ceased within weeks. Their stock price, which had been declining due to security concerns, rebounded sharply. 6 months later, Catherine brought news that changed everything. Google is interested in acquiring Adamant, she announced during our weekly strategy meeting. Initial offer is $1.2 billion. The figure hung in the air between us, representing a validation I hadn't realized I still needed. They want you to stay on as chief security architect. Catherine continued. 5-year contract, full research budget, complete technical autonomy. I thought about the journey from the humiliation in Adam's office to building something valued at over $1 billion in less than 4 years. About emptying my retirement account and selling my car to fund a vision no one else could see. About proving, definitively and irrefutably, that innovation had nothing to do with age and everything to do with perspective. Schedule the meeting, I told Catherine. Let's hear what they have to say. The acquisition closed 3 months later at $1.4 billion. My share, after Catherine's stake and other minor investors, was just over $1 billion. The press release announced me as pioneering security researcher Dr. Mira Patel, who would lead Google's new advanced security division. On the day the acquisition was announced, I received a text message from Ethan. You deserve better from us. Congratulations on building something remarkable. I appreciated his acknowledgement but found I no longer needed it. The validation I'd once sought from Nexus had been rendered irrelevant by what I built without them. 2 weeks later, attending a technology conference as one of the keynote speakers, I encountered Adam Reynolds in the hallway between sessions. His company badge identified him now as strategic advisor, the same role he'd once offered me. Corporate fortunes change quickly in technology. Mira, he greeted me with the careful deference people show to those who have demonstrably surpassed them. Remarkable achievement with adamant. If I'd known what you were capable of. You did know, I interrupted gently. That was never the issue, Adam. I left him there in the hallway, moving toward the stage where I would present Adamant's technology to an audience of industry leaders. The greatest revenge, I've discovered, isn't showing others what they missed. It's creating something so significant that their opinion becomes irrelevant. Every dismissal, every underestimation, every closed door became fuel for the determination that built Adamant. When I speak to young technologists now, especially women navigating male-dominated industries, I tell them this. Your value isn't determined by those who fail to recognize it. Sometimes being underestimated is the greatest competitive advantage you'll ever have. After all, no one watches the person they've dismissed as too old to innovate, which gives you all the freedom in the world to prove them catastrophically wrong.